We belong to an age of endless possibilities here in America. Um, if you listen to the scientific community with stem cell research and or the technological community, there always seems to be endless possibilities on the near horizon with cars that can drive themselves, um, and other things like that. If you look at what China's accomplishing right now, there are also dark possibilities on the future or on the horizon, with their what I call God system, where they evaluate everyone's behavior based on um, some kind of weird ethics system that only they can judge themselves by camera. And this ethics system determines whether somebody is allowed to travel or have other basic allowances of freedom. So, just because we have advancements and possibilities does not mean that, in essence, that they will turn out good in the end. It's the morality behind it that really matters. And in that light, if you want to talk about our future, it's not just technology or anything like that that really matters in the end. It's who's going to be using it, and that would be our children. That is our future. It's our children. I have a 3-year-old now, so this is something that's always constantly on my mind. Is it's up to us as parents, to decide what kind of future we're going to have. Now, obviously, we can't control everything that our children do, nor would I want to. That's the whole point of free choice, or free will, I should say. But we play a big part in shaping and molding the kind of people that our children are going to end up being. And what kind of people are we beginning to bring into the future? When we look at kids and youth here in America today, particularly millennials, the famed millennial generation, of which I believe I'm a part of. I think they said it was from like 1984 to the mid 90s, something like that. I could be completely wrong, but the millennials, that's probably my generation. I'm 33 years old, and it's been a very maligned generation, with much merit, with some merit. Um, Most people point to the millennial generation as the one that's significantly been dumbed down by the education system, which is just basically propaganda. It's a total reworking of our country's history. Um, it's probably the first generation that we've seen that can be, on the whole, spoken about as secular. Um, as our country becomes more and more post-Christian, our succeeding generations very obviously are gonna reflect that because of how we raise them. Um, so if we raise them without God and church and without basic biblical morality, is it any wonder that as they grow and begin to make choices in the world, that they will not be making choices based on biblical Judeo-Christian values? Um, if we teach them that they themselves are God, God is within them, and that organized religion is the problem, then is it any wonder why the church's numbers are plummeting? Why church membership is down, and the churches that do show um, membership rising, or a steady sort of membership numbers, are the ones that are not grounded in biblical truth, but rather a sort of spiritual buffet, that embraces all ways as ways to God, and does not uh, speak of the gospel in any true meaning of the idea or the concept of the doctrines, but instead, just like I said, teaches that all roads eventually lead to God. Um, but this millennial generation, mine, and the succeeding generation, which would be my son, I suppose, um, it's besides the fact that they are being brought up in a very secular society now and the effects that that can have, um, we're beginning to see also that if you really take a step back and look at what we are doing to our kids these days, it's frightening, and it leaves me no room to wonder at all why so many children today are doing shockingly appalling things like shooting up schools or taking part in opioid abuse, which myself I I went down that road myself. But it's no wonder that kids are flying into this in mass droves. The opioid abuse or shooting up schools or teenage pregnancies, all these things. There's so many things and that we are doing to our kids these days that are absolutely annihilating their future. I mean, if we cared at all for our future at all, we're not showing it in any way. What we are doing to our kids is absolutely horrific if you think about it. First off, would be abortion. We're slaughtering half of our kids. Number one, millennials today are not having kids at any normal rate. I think there's like, each couple is having like maybe one child at the most, and most don't even have kids, don't even get married. So we're not producing children, number one, which is damning right off the bat. And those that are quote unquote sexually reproducing are having those children aborted. I mean, I think there's over 300,000 abortions a year. I mean, that's staggering. So we're killing our kids, number one, right off the bat. And those that we do not abort, there is a whole obstacle course, a whole minefield of destructive bombs that we have put in front of their growth, their spiritual, their mental well-being, and just their ability to cope in everyday society. The first would be drugs. We have record amounts of our kids, numbers of our kids today on any number of drugs. Particularly young boys are seem to be a huge target of the psychiatric drugs in adolescence. There is a war on boys in a lot of ways because of this idea of toxic masculinity that is perforated around and tossed around in the culture without any real concept of what that might mean. It just means any kind of behavior that a boy might exhibit. Boys are not like girls at all. This should be obvious, but most people don't like to admit that anymore. And one of the differences is that girls are much better at sitting quietly and learning in a classroom setting. They just have always shown a better grasp of this basic trait over boys. And so boys that show their natural inclination towards exuberance and running around and imagination and not sitting still and playing are labeled as having ADHD or any number of psychiatric issues and are, in a lot of cases, given drugs, antidepressants, ADHD medication, which effectively turn them into zombies. No long-term studies can possibly have been done on the effects of these drugs on our kids. If you go to it's cchrint.org, it's the International Mental Health Watchdog, and you go to the psychiatric drugs section of the website, they break it down for you how many kids are on these different kinds of drugs. And I'll just read the top part here. It says the following information is the most accurate and documented data available on psychiatric drug usage in the United States. The information is from IQVIA, formerly IMS Health, a company that provides information, services, and technology for the healthcare industry. It is the largest vendor of U.S. physicians prescribing data, so it's pretty accurate. The following data was taken from the IQVIA Total Patient Tracker Database for year 2017, extracted April 2018. To see drug regulatory agency warnings, studies, documented side effects of the psychiatric drugs prescribed to children, click the links below. But anyway, they have the drugs broken down by class, by age group, and the number of people in that age group that are prescribed and taking these medications. So if you just scroll down the page to ADHD drugs, in kids, apparently, from reading this right, from the ages of 0 to 5, there are 80,235 of them prescribed. And then it just breaks down from ages 0 to 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 12, 13 to 17, all the way up to 17 years of age, because then at 18 you're technically an adult. Okay, but the total number of kids that are prescribed ADHD drugs from 0 up to 17 are 3.6 million children right now prescribed ADHD medication. 3.6 million are taking ADHD medication basically on a daily basis. If you scroll down to antidepressants, you get again from ages 0 to 17, you get 2.1 million. Antipsychotic drugs, 1.1 million. And anti-anxiety is 1.4 million. Now, some of these drugs, or some of these numbers, the kids might be prescribed more than one type of drug. So there may be kids that are prescribed ADHD and antidepressants, and maybe antipsychotics, anti-anxiety. Some of these kids are prescribed more than one. But if you add all these up, you're talking about 3 million, 5 million, 6 million, 7 million, probably close to 10 million kids that are on these medications, that there is no real long-term, there couldn't possibly be any long-term studies done on these. They effectively turn kids into zombies. I read about it all the time online, doctors and who are really discouraged by the ease with which children are prescribed these medications, and are kind of sounding the alarms as best they can online as to the damage these drugs do, and the potential for damage, because we don't know what they actually will do to kids over the long term in a brain that is still forming. Your brain is still forming up into your 20s, from what I've heard. So you're talking about a time that is very formative, very easily influenced in a child's development. And you're bombarding him, millions of them apparently, with these psychiatric, anti-anxiety, antipsychotic, antidepressant drugs. I mean, that's frightening. And, if you study especially the rash of shootings, and this doesn't just include children, but adults as well, the rash of shootings that have, these mass shootings that have been going on in Las Vegas, these school shootings like Parkland, behind all of them, or a lot of them that I've heard of, are these drugs, these ADHD, antidepressants, antipsychotics. A lot of these people that are doing these shootings, committing these mass shootings, are on these drugs. And that's frightening, I'm not saying it's the only reason these shootings happen. There's a whole host of reasons why kids might go into a school and shoot their peers. The drugs just being one of them, but that's what I'm talking about. We're putting so many obstacles in front of these children's success. We're confusing them at such a rate, and providing them with so much, so many things that would cause them to doubt themselves, doubt their parents, doubt the society around them, that we want their best, that we have their best interest at heart. That is no wonder that they feel so isolated and alone, and ready to lash out. Social media is something else that I would blame very much for children's suicides. I just heard it on the Daily Wire, one of their podcasts, about a 9-year-old who hung herself. I believe it was a girl. they weren't sure. It just happened out of the blue. She was getting ready to go to lunch with her mother after school, and she was taking too long, so her mom went up to her bedroom, and she had hung herself in the closet. And this was after a rash of bullying at school. Um, Now, our society is very quick to blame bullying as the cause for a lot of the suicides and a lot of the school shootings. I don't think that. I, I I'm not saying bullying is good. It is not, but there is an appropriate way to teach children how to respond to it. And you got to think of it like this: bullying has been around forever. Since there have been children, there have been bullies. Cain and Abel. Cain was the first bully. He actually killed his brother. So this stuff's been going on forever. Um, but you got to look back 50, 60, 70 years ago in our country's history, when bullying was just as prevalent back then as it is today, and nobody was shooting up schools. Kids were not killing themselves in mass droves. Um, And a lot of it, I think, can be blamed on social media, which is another, besides these drugs that we're pumping into our kids, another one of the big causes for this kind of intense self-evaluation, this introspective nightmare that we've plunged our kids into. This surface obsession with looks and appearances. Um, Kids are being taught on social media through Facebook and the like button and Twitter how many followers you have, and Instagram how many people think your newest selfie is hot. They're being taught that your appearance and your physical attributes are the sum total of your worth. They're being taught. Well, I mean, one thing you can't deny is how outrageously abusive people are to each other online. And you combine that with what they deal with at school, and you get a broader picture of the fact that these kids are dealing with an overwhelming amount of criticism, which is focused entirely on their appearance. Um, and at the same time, they're being taught that their appearance is a vital part of who they are and their worth. So it isn't any wonder that they react these ways. Is it any wonder when social media makes you so intensely isolated from those around you? You can be on your phone in a crowd of people and be one of the most lonely people there. You can Kids sit around the dinner table on their Nooks, on their cell phones, on their iPads all the time. They spend a lot of their waking hours involved in this intensely in this online world in which their parents are not there to safeguard them in any way, shape, or form. And basically, your kid's safety and well-being is left in the hands of people like Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey, people who do not give a crap whatsoever about your kids or how well they're doing or what they may be viewing online. Pornography is another evil trap waiting for them too. Is it any wonder, with how easy it is to view pornography, that kids are coming away from, in their budding years of understanding and realizing what sexuality is in the female and male body and the differences between the two? Yes, there are differences, you transgender maniacs. When they're just starting to learn all this stuff, and they're being shown, gangbangs easily viewed online, all these very degrading movies showing women being gangbanged by 8 different dudes at one time, and the resulting disgusting perversions. And we wonder why their sexuality is so warped when they're viewing this stuff very easily at such young ages. You know, it, and one thing that's funny too, there's 2 different articles also that I read across of 2 stories that have really stood out. One being the story of a male gym teacher who was punished for refusing to oversee a middle school girl who wanted to who basically claimed that she's a boy. Is a transgender girl, claiming a girl who thinks she's a boy. This gym teacher was fired from his job because he didn't want to he didn't want to oversee her getting dressed in the male locker room. Now, bear in mind that the school gave this girl permission to believe that she was a boy, number one, gave her the right to get changed in this boy's locker room without consulting any of the other boys in the locker room first, without consulting any of those boys' parents, and without consulting the male gym teacher who oversees the male boys' locker room. Nobody was briefed that this girl was going to show up in there and start getting undressed. And this is just another thing that is happening in a lot of schools around the country, where where transgender students, students who should uh, be the focus of help. I don't know of a better way to put it. It's that they need help. Obviously, they don't need their confusion encouraged. Number one, but their desires and their wants, their demands are put over the rest of the schools. So just think about it. This girl who wants to be a boy says, I want to go get changed in there because I want to be a boy. I think I'm a boy inside my mind. I think I'm a boy. So her rights trump everybody else's. And this male gym teacher is now in trouble because he didn't want to watch a prepubescent girl get undressed in the locker room. This is the kind of insanity that our kids are subjected to and surrounded by all the time now. And we wonder why they're a mess. We wonder why our kids don't even know what a penis or a vagina is or who would have them, you know? And pornography, again, does not help any of this, where even the kids that realize that women have breasts and vaginas and everything, they're getting their introduction to that through pornography. So it's just a total mess. And the really troubling thing is when you see people actually trying to stand up for the things that they think are right, morally speaking, like this gym teacher, they're censored and punished and rebuked and removed from their jobs. What kind of an example is that to the children at the school when their gym teacher stands up for common sense and stands up for his moral values and the fact that he doesn't want to watch a 13 or 14-year-old girl get undressed in his locker room? He has a problem with that. How shocking. And so his male students who are under his supervision now see that he can get fired for something like that. That it is now wrong to not watch a 14-year-old girl get undressed when you're a 40-something-year-old male teacher. That's the message you just sent those kids at the end of the day. And you sent them the message also that you can get punished and lose your job for standing up for what you believe in, for standing up for common sense morality. So this is the kind of signals and messages that we're sending our kids en masse in society now. Another example would be a story that's been floating around the internet here recently from UC Berkeley. Big shock. A Christian student senator there faces major backlash for defending biblical view on gender. This is from CBN.com. Let's see what it says. CBN News. In what many are viewing as a chilling attack on freedom of religion and speech, students at the University of California, Berkeley are calling for the resignation of a student senator after she opted to abstain from a pro-transgender vote. So she didn't even vote, she just opted to abstain. The backlash against Berkeley Jr. Isabella Chow began on October the 31st when the Queer Alliance Resource Center called on the Student Senate to pass a measure condemning the Trump administration for what critics view as its bid to define transgenderism out of existence, which is not true. He isn't trying to define it out of existence, but he is trying to uphold the basic biological reality that there's a difference between men and women. I'm open to anybody trying to convince me otherwise biologically. Um, if there are scientists out there that can prove that gender is malleable and fluid and that you can become a man or a woman based on your desires or what you feel deep down, if you can provide biological proof of that, I'm open to it. But I sincerely doubt that anybody can. Nobody's done it yet. The basic defense for it is how you feel, and that just doesn't cut it in any kind of world that I live in. Um, but the article goes on here. Specifically, the administration is considering a legal definition of gender that would require one's declared sex match what's on his or her birth certificate. So they're trying to change that. Chow, a Christian, chose to abstain from voting, citing her faith. In a 5-paragraph statement to her Senate colleagues explaining her decision, she noted that while discrimination is never ever okay, voting for such a measure would compromise her deeply held Christian values. And, quote, this is what she said, quote, as a Christian, I personally do believe that certain acts and lifestyles conflict with what is good, right, and true, Chow 20 wrote. Quote, I believe that God created male and female at the beginning of time and designed marriage between one man and one woman. For me, to love another person does not mean that I silently concur when, at the bottom of my heart, I do not believe that your choices are right or the best for you as an individual, she said, noting that she views the LGBTQ community as valid and loved. So she didn't even deny that the LGBT community, um, she didn't criticize them really in any strong way. She just said that it violates her moral point of view, and that as such, she wasn't going to vote against them. She was merely going to abstain. And this set off a whole crap storm of controversy and anger directed at her, the other student bodies, and her other senators on the student body demanded her resignation. And of course, there's been a whole wave of persecution against her at UC Berkeley. Never mind that this is just her free speech, and she has every right to speak and defend her moral beliefs. But that's beyond the pale these days. You're beyond the pale if you don't just shut up and repeat it exactly as you're told to repeat. And these are the results of children being raised. I hate to say it, in a culture that has rejected basic values and morals. This is what you get: a very closed-minded society that is rejecting the values that we've put in place for our country and our culture, like free speech, freedom of religion, um, and all these things. They're now looking at that as the enemy. I've heard more than one person from UC Berkeley flat out say that they don't care about the free speech rights of anyone on the conservative movement. They want them silenced and they want them out of the picture. I've heard that said from many different people at UC Berkeley, from those in Antifa and other places like that. Um, so this is by no means an isolated incident. But this is the result of all this barrage of confusion that we're sending our kids as we raise them, um, telling them that all morality is basically the same, relativism, that all roads lead to God, that what they feel on the inside is their basic truth, and anyone who disagrees with that is denying them as a person. They're being unpersoned. This is madness, and teaching our kids this is having these kind of results, having the kind of results that you see at UC Berkeley, where free speech and freedom of religion is looked at as something to be crushed. Um, it results in the type of things that happen, for example, to that male gym teacher at the school, where he didn't want to watch a 14-year-old girl get undressed. And you just sent those kids a message that standing up for what you believe in is going to get you fired from your job. Standing up for basic morality will get you fired from your job. In addition to an overwhelming wave of criticism, censure, and ridicule. Very few people want to stand up, especially, you got to remember too that kids are in those formative years. They don't want to have to stand. They want to fit in. They want to get along with their peers. You want to be accepted by your peers. And so your natural inclination is to do that. It's to bend to the dictates of society around you. I'm not saying all kids are like that. There are many that actually stand up for what they believe in very boldly, more boldly than I do. Um, but on the whole, at that period in your life, I remember it well. You want to fit in, you want to be accepted by your peers, and so many of them, when they're told that 2 + 2 = 5, are going to follow that dictum right off the bat. Um, so uh, I didn't want to ramble on too long, but this is a very disturbing view, I think, down the road of what possibly my son's generation could look like as they hit their 20s and their late teens going out of high school. Being told that at any point they can decide to be a man or a woman, being encouraged as they are at many schools to play around with their gender at the ages of 4 or 5. And I'm not rambling on about some kind of isolated incidents. I've heard this from a number of schools in the news, proudly trumpeted by places like CNN or MSNBC or other secular, more liberal-minded news outlets that proudly talk about this kind of stuff. USA Today has talked about it. And then from the other side, like Daily Wire or what have you, Breitbart, etc., who criticize it. So, I mean, I've heard it from more than one place that schools are encouraging kids to do these things. There was a school recently that had a drag queen come in for career day. I mean, this is what we're subjecting our kids to, in particular in the public schools. So I would encourage parents on the whole these days to keep your kids as far away from the public school as possible. It's the public school that's going to encourage kids to be on psychiatric medication. If they act out in class, it's the public school that's bringing drag queens in on career day. That's firing male gym teachers for not wanting to look at 14-year-old girls getting dressed. It's public, secular, liberal-minded education that has subjected Isabella Chow at Berkeley to the kind of persecution that she's had to endure just for abstaining from a vote. Um, yeah, I mean, I was homeschooled growing up, and I used to crow and complain about it as if I was being tortured because I wanted to be accepted by my peers. I wanted to be in a normal school with what I thought was normal schools with normal kids doing normal things. It's only as I've gotten older that I've seen the profound wisdom in keeping me out of there. That would have been an absolute nightmare. I went through enough, I made enough mistakes and committed enough stupid, sinful acts on my own. Um, and I was kept out of the public schools. If I had been in there, I don't even know what would have happened. So I'm grateful that I wasn't. And my son will never be in a public school if there's anything I can do about it. Um, and also just consider the total dumbing down of history in the public schools. I mean, it's been widely known that that the history that our kids are being taught is not our true history. That these days they're taught a lot of times in public schools a very negative view of what America is and how America was founded. Yes, every society has committed sins. We've all done things that were wrong. There is no society on earth that has ever been formed, and no country that has ever been formed that has not had some sort of a dark past or committed some sort of injustice on somebody somewhere. But those things are in the past, and they are things that our country has apologized and repented of and turned away from on the whole. Um, that's another topic in a lot of ways for other podcasts, but suffice it to say, um, all things being equal with all countries, our country has done much good in the world and has been founded on on good, basic Christian values where all men are equal. Have we been perfect? Far from it. Were we hypocritical for a long part of our founding up until the 1800s, the mid 1800s, and the Civil War? Yes, in a lot of ways, with the way black people were treated in this country. And you can even point to afterwards in the 1940s with the Japanese during World War II. We've done many things that were wrong, but you can't, if you're going to judge every society from its, or especially Western societies, judge them by their worst aspects and only look at the good aspects of Middle Eastern or Asian countries, then you've set up a very unfair, uneven task before anybody that is trying to have a fair clinical view of the world and of society at large. So anyway, that's my podcast for today. I think there's a lot of work, obviously, that needs to be done with kids and with our future here in America. The first thing for parents today is to know that the public school system is not your friend and is not your kids' friends and does not have your children's best interest at heart, in my opinion. They are there to teach their view of the world, which is propaganda at this point. And they do not have your children's best interest at heart. I'll just put it that way. I think I've laid out a few very disturbing trends and events that are happening within that construct very succinctly. So spread the word and do what you can to resist the wholesale destruction of the next generation, which really is our future, a future which I'm very skeptical that a lot of the people in power on the liberal left really want to turn out right. I'm skeptical that they really want a good future for us. I'm not talking about all liberals. I'm not talking about all those on the left. I'm talking about those in power on the progressive left. I'm very skeptical that they really care about the well-being and future of American children. I don't think they have their best interests at heart. And these things, the psychiatric drugs, the gender confusion, the mass confusion on morality, the school shootings, all these things are, I think, you can lay the blame in a large part at their feet. So anyway, you can subscribe to Woke Nation on iTunes, also on YouTube, my YouTube channel. All these podcast episodes are on YouTube as well, my YouTube channel and Woke Nation. Like and follow the Woke Nation Facebook page. You can email me comments, criticisms, or abuse at roadnottaken04@Juno. Yes, Juno still exists, juno.com. Until next week, good night and God be with you.